Corsair, Apple Floppy Days, Commodore, Tandy Floppy Days, Atari, TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, ST Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3.
Introducing the Apple IIc.
Atari 1040 ST. Commodore 64. What?
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari.
At his Radio Shack Color Computer 3.
Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
For computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
The wonder computer of the 1980s. The Commodore VIC-20.
Hello and welcome to episode 151 of the Floppy Days Podcast for May 2025. My name is Randy Kindig and I'm the host to this ode to computers that only survive in our memories and our collections. You know, I really enjoy this time of the month. This is the one day a month I get to sit down and just spout out about vintage computers with some friends of mine who also care about vintage computers, and I really enjoy this particular day each month. I hope you do as well. This month I'm continuing to step aside from the ongoing series of episodes about the HP 97 and 67 programmable calculators to bring you a timely interview that basically constitutes current news. Now, I don't often do this, but this news was so exciting to me that I wanted to bring this to all my listeners as soon as possible. The interviewee is James Nagle, and the topic is the sudden and welcome news that James is planning to revive the iconic Compute magazine under the equally iconic name Compute's Gazette. I hope you'll stick around to hear about James' plans and are as excited as I am to find out where this goes. For upcoming shows, we do have one more episode in this series on the HP 97 with HP calculator historian Władek Mirjanchevich. I will air that episode very soon. Before we go on, I want to mention some of the also vintage computer fans who have a storefront that support our vintage computing hobby. One of which is 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts. He's got a lot of video cables, power supplies, cartridges, upgrades, and more for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms. I've gotten a lot of things from Corey to enhance my collection, and I often talk about things that I've gotten from him. Corey's been a friend of the show for some time, and I really appreciate his support of the podcast. Check out his site. Also, arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. It's another terrific site to get vintage computer items. Greg really does have an amazing variety of hard-to-find items for a large number of platforms. I've also gotten quite a few things for my vintage computer collection from Greg. Greg is very active in the community. And if anything shows out of stock on his site, you can just ping Greg through the contact form, and he can check whether he has or can get more of the item for you. And finally, FutureVision Research, managed by my friend Brian Cox. If you're in need of a FujiNet for any of the official platforms, which today is the Apple II, the Atari 8-bit, the Coco, and the Coleco Atom, with more to come, Brian has what you need. He also has some cool soldering kits for whatever level you're at, including beginner, most of which I own and are planning to put together. For all of these storefronts, if you would, when you place an order, please mention Floppy Days in the notes or comments of the order, and that will help support the podcast. I also want to mention that there are some listeners who appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com, and I really appreciate everyone who does that, and it does help offset the cost of running the podcast. I do have ways that I reward those who are generous enough to monetarily support Floppy Days on Patreon, such as early access to any videos that I do of interviews. And you can visit Patreon to see more details concerning the rewards for supporters. Also regarding that, I wanted to encourage everyone to subscribe to the Floppy Days YouTube channel. Besides iTunes and other places, I publish all the audio episodes as well to YouTube. And in addition, any video that I capture of interviews, and even in some cases, computer-based episodes, get published to YouTube. I'm planning to utilize that medium even more over time, and it would really help to get as many subscribers there as possible. The link to the YouTube channel can be found by searching for Floppy Days, by using the link in the show notes, or by using the link from the website. And to get there on the main page, you click the Go to YouTube channel icon. I just want to say it is my intention to always make all content available to everyone at no cost, while at the same time providing some benefits for those generous enough to support the podcast. I hope you agree I've come up with a good compromise, but please let me know your thoughts. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Hi, I'm James Nagle, and I'm working on the revival of the new Computes Gazette magazine. You're listening to Floppy Days.
Okay, now for new acquisitions and what I've been up to. For new acquisitions this month, I have a couple of Commodore-related things that I wanted to talk about. I've always been fascinated by the attempts to bring a GUI, a mouse-driven GUI, to some of these old machines, some of the 8-bit machines that didn't really have the power to have menus and use a mouse. Now, I know there was a mouse available that you could use for the Commodore 64 or the Tandy Coco, but the machine wasn't really made to use those. And so recently I saw that there was a new OS called C64 OS that attempts to and actually does a great job of bringing mouse and menus to the Commodore 64. And that actually feels fast. So with this is right off the website. You can have multiple desktops with aliases to your favorite C64 OS applications, utilities, and other C64 software. You can have up to 5 drives at the same time. You have ability to mount disk images, check your calendar, customize your theme, and so on. You can even get online and browse Wikipedia. So it comes bundled with a bunch of useful utilities that can be opened and used concurrently with the C64 OS application, including a calculator, a calendar, a memo pad, a music player, and so on. It does come, and I was impressed by the professionally printed user's guide, and it has a custom labeled SD card with the complete system pre-installed and ready to boot up. The card includes an OS archive and installation tools, so you can install C64 OS on a different C64 mass storage device. So this is really cool. I actually haven't had a chance to play with this a lot, but I have looked at the videos that are online, and there's some nice tutorials on how to use C64 OS, and it is a very cool, very good implementation of a GUI for the Commodore 64. So well done, and I'm really looking forward to playing with this some more. The other Commodore related item that I got is something called the PiStorm. And I bought this for my Amiga 500. It's an adapter which uses a Raspberry Pi to provide a CPU accelerator, a graphics card, hard disk interface, Wi-Fi, and other enhancements. There's a CPU relocator, a Raspberry Pi 3A Plus, and a pre-configured SD card that are available as options for this as well. So what it does is bypass the original 68,000 CPU in the Amiga 500 and uses the Raspberry Pi to emulate the 68K CPU at a much quicker rate than the original processor. It uses not only the Pi's raw processing power, but also can use graphics, memory, network interfaces, and storage for the Amiga. So it makes it a pretty versatile product. It is an adapter board intended to be paired with a Raspberry Pi Model 3A Plus. It goes in the dip socket and acts in place of the CPU, but functionality can be extended beyond the CPU emulation, as I mentioned. So general performance of this, they say, to replace the 68,000 CPU is somewhere around equivalent to a 100 to 125 megahertz 68030 processor. So very cool. I'm looking forward to putting this in one of my Amiga 500s and checking this out. It's fairly inexpensive, especially since I already had a Model 3A Plus of the Raspberry Pi, and it's pretty easy to connect the Raspberry Pi to this board and put it in your machine. So something I'm going to play with more and maybe report back on later. Okay, well that's it for the new acquisitions this month, and now I wanted to cover what I've been up to. I'm very pleased to report that I've managed to get a start on the book that I've threatened to put together for quite some time now. The book I'm referring to is a quick reference guide for a wide variety of machines. For me personally, and I'm sure it's true for many of the listeners, I have a wide variety of machines in my collection. In my case, it's over 60 different models at last count. Whenever I go to pull out a machine, it's a challenge just to figure out how to use the darn thing. Other than the Atari 8-bit and the TRS-80 Model 1, both of which I owned back in the day and which I'm pretty familiar with, there are few machines that I can just hook up and use without having to look up all sorts of information on how to use it. Just basic things like how to hook up peripherals to the right ports and turn them on in the right order, how to get to BASIC, how to do some simple things in BASIC and DOS and other rudimentary things. Every single machine, and even in some cases, different models of the same family, is different. For instance, when I turn on my Commodore 64, I have no clue how to use the esoteric commands that are needed to load in a file from disk or even to do a directory of the disk. The Commodore 64 is definitely unique in that respect. Most of the machines that I have some sort of uniqueness to them that can make them difficult to use. For myself, over the years, I've started to make cheat sheets for each machine to help with this. My idea for a book was to make a cheat sheet for a wide variety of machines, organized into a single volume that could be pulled out and referenced whenever I'm playing with a different computer. A few weeks ago, I had some free time and decided to just take a first shot at the categories to include, and decided to pick a single computer platform with which to use as a proof of concept. As I know the most about Atari 8-bit computers, that's what I decided to start with. To date, I've created a quick reference for the Atari 800 computer and put it out to the community for feedback. I'm planning to have a different quick reference card for each of the Atari 8-bit models, as well as many other machines, of course. So there will be one for the Atari 400, the 600XL, the 1200XL, the 130XE, etc., as well as the Commodore 64, the 128, the Plus 4, the VIC-20, etc. I found this to be a lot of fun to put together, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback and encouragement from the community thus far. I'm pretty much settled on a format, so now comes the hard part, gathering all the pertinent information for each computer. That's going to take a ton of work, and I'm really counting on the community to help me get that information correct and to keep me honest. If you want to see what I've done so far, go to floppydays.canva.site and please provide feedback. I'd love to hear what you think. More to come as this makes progress. And that's it for new acquisitions and what I've been up to this month.
From the Open Apple Podcast,
this is Ken.
And this is Mike.
And you're listening to Floppy Days.
Okay, and now for our upcoming vintage computer shows. We're really getting into the thick of the computer show season now. There have been some really good computer shows thus far, and many more to come this year. First up, as of this recording, it's just actually a couple days away, so you may not hear this in time, but RetroFest 2025 is May 31st through June 1st at the Steam Museum of the Great Western Railway in Swindon, UK. June 14th is the Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo at New Westminster, British Columbia, Canada. VCF Southwest, June 20th through the 22nd at the Davidson Gundy Alumni Center at the University of Texas, Dallas. I had high hopes that I'd be able to attend that this year, but due to various reasons, we're not going to be able to go to Dallas that weekend, so I'm not going to be able to make it this year, maybe next year. Southern Fried Gaming Expo is the same weekend. It's in conjunction with VCF Southeast. So it's June 20th through the 22nd in Atlanta, Georgia. Also that same weekend, so there's 3 shows all the same weekend. Pacific Commodore Expo Northwest is June 21st through the 22nd at the Old Rainier Brewery, Intraspace in Seattle, Washington. In July, Kansas Fest. It's going to be virtual only this year. There won't be any in-person conference. That'll be July 18th through the 20th. July 26th through the 27th will be the Init Hello Apple II Conference. This is a new one. It's just a week after Kansas Fest. It's at the System Source Computer Museum in Hunt Valley, Maryland. VCF West is August 1st through the 2nd at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. An Atari show, Fujiyama, is August 11th through the 17th in Langenfeld, Germany. The big one, VCF Midwest. This year is September 13th through the 14th. I will, of course, be there. This is at the Renaissance Schaumburg Convention Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. The same month, a couple weeks later, September 26th through the 28th, I will also be there is Tandy Assembly at the Courtyard by Marriott in Springfield, Ohio. October 17th through the 19th is the Portland Retro Gaming Expo at the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. I really want to get out to that one sometime. And October 25th is the Chicago TI International World Fair at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. You can go to the Floppy Days website. The current schedule is always published there. There's a link there. Again, go to the Floppy Days website. You can find the link, and you can always check the current schedule. And that's it for remaining shows in 2025.
This is Michael Tomchek. I've been called the marketing father of the home computer, and you're listening to the Floppy Days broadcast.
Okay, now for a little bit of feedback. So I did get an email from Gene Wright. Gene had a couple of comments about the HP 97 shows that have been done thus far. He wanted to mention a couple of things. The HP 97S, which we did not talk about on the podcast. He says this was a special HP 97 that had a cable coming out to a BCD module. And secondly, he wanted to point out that the HP 67 and 97 card reader was called a smart card reader. It meant you could record a program to a card, and it would also record calculator settings like the display mode, the angular mode, flags that were set or cleared, etc., so that the program could run using the calculator state that was in place when it was recorded. Otherwise, you would have needed to include program steps as the program began to run that would change the display to, for instance, 4 decimal places, put the calculator into radians mode and set flag 2, or things like that. But you didn't have to do that on the 67 or 97. It recorded those settings onto the card. Thank you, Gene. I really appreciate you writing in and giving us some more information about the HP 97. Very interesting information. And that's it for feedback this month. And now we have the interview with James Nagle about his plans to revive the Computes Gazette magazine. Note that this interview took place on May 1st, 2025. I want to welcome the gentleman who's working on reviving an iconic computer magazine, Mr. Edwin James Nagle. I guess you go by James, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I go by James. That's my middle name. It's what I grew up with. So.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So let's start out by having you tell the audience where you live and what you do these days.
I live in Austin, Texas, or actually just outside of Austin, suburb. But yeah, I work full time in cybersecurity. But my passion is really retro computing.
Okay, I see some. On this video, I see some retro computers behind you there. I saw a Tandy color computer, and I see some Commodore 1541 drives back there.
Yeah, this is, I apologize for the mess. This is my lab where I take all the junk computers that need refurbishing and fixing, and this is kind of where they live until they get work done.
Oh, I see a BBC Micro back there too.
Yeah, I've recently gotten into European computers. That was I've got an Amstrad CPC 464 and a BBC Micro.
I've got those. Yeah.
Yeah. So just really awesome computers. That's kind of one of the things, when I really started getting into retro computing is, one of the things that was really fascinating to me is, back in the old days, when I would pick up computer magazines and stuff, because I had a Commodore 64 growing up, but I always saw all these other computers in these magazines. It's like, man, I wish I really could get one of those. Well, now I'm older and I can. So
exactly. That's the same thing I went through. It's like there were all these other computers. I had an Atari 8-bit, and there are all these other computers that you kind of, drool over a little bit just because you like variety, right? But you couldn't afford more than one computer back in the day, and then you get older, and those machines become more accessible, and you end up collecting them. So I understand how that is. So your first computer at home was a Commodore 64?
Yeah, that's right. So I grew up with a Commodore 64. I'd actually gotten it as a Christmas present from my older brother, probably in 1986 or 87.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just a kid. And my older brother, John, he was 11 years older than I was. So,
quite a bit older.
Quite a bit older. He was really big into programming and game programming. And he had also started on the Commodore 64. That's what he got. And also a, TRS-80 color computer and that. So, but he ended up with an IBM PC clone. And that's what he kind of migrated to that pretty quick after the Commodore and started doing development work there. But I didn't have any computer at the time. So, I used to sneak into his room while he was gone and, jump on his computer and play video games and then, sneak away when he got home. But there was one day, it was a couple months before Christmas, that I snuck into his room, and there was a computer game that I used to like to play on his PC called Starflight. And he had it on disk. And he had a pretty small hard drive, so he did all of his development work and stuff on, saved all his files to the hard drive. But I didn't know really what I was doing, just kind of mucking around in his room. And I loaded up the disk, and so I don't remember exactly how it happened, but when he come home, I was in a hurry to leave, and I dropped out and back into DOS and typed delete star.star, thinking that I was going to cover my tracks and remove all the files from his hard drive. Well, I removed all the files from my hard drive, so he was pretty upset about that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But he gave me his old Commodore 64 and a stack of magazines to go along with it. Pretty nice. Soon after that for Christmas.
Nice. So your brother, you said, was 11 years older. I understand he's not around anymore. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, we lost him in 2022.
Okay. So what did you do with that computer? After you got it, did you mainly play games on it?
So played games, had an assortment of, pirated games from back in the day, people trading floppies and that kind of thing. Had some original stuff too, but I'd also gotten a stack of computer magazines along with the computer that he gave me, and he had, a selection of Computes Gazette, Ahoy, Run, some of the others.
Yeah.
But I really became fascinated with, typing in computer programs at that point. So
mainly games.
Yeah. So I still remember Crossroads, is typing all that in and typing in all the machine language and, having no idea what I was doing. I didn't really learn a whole lot from typing in machine language code, but the basic programs that, I picked up some basic programming that way.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So were you part of any user groups back in the day?
So where we grew up, we were in a very rural part of southern West Virginia. So there wasn't really, back in those days especially, there wasn't really a ton of people that, number one, had computers, or number two, were even interested. So the closest user group that I found, and I found it from one of the user group updates in Computes Gazette magazine, was, I think it was called Mid-Ohio Valley Commodore Club. And that was probably in a location that was at least 4 hours driving distance from where I was at. So
wow. Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the opportunity to really participate, but I do remember that I wrote them a letter, regular mail, and sent it to them when I was a kid, kind of talking about how I was interested in, what was going on with the club. So they actually subscribed me to the newsletter. that they produce from the Commodore Club. And I got those for a while, and that was pretty neat.
Yeah, it would be. At least you could sort of feel like you were part of the club. Right?
Yep. So that was awesome.
So I assume at some point, did you move on to any other computers after the Commodore 64? Or
yeah, I did. So my older brother, John, and my other older brother, Dusty, they both worked at an engineering office with my dad. And they got I think they had, some 8088 PCs, some XT PCs, and they had upgraded to like, 286, 386. They were running AutoCAD and things like that on those systems. So they had brought an XT clone home and, basically gave it to me to play around with. So I picked up on that and really got into BBSs and telecommunications and that kind of thing. Kind of going back to your, question about clubs and, my predicament about, living so far out in the sticks.
Mm-hmm.
BBSs was a way around that. So, discovered, telecomputing, being able to call it BBSs and, talk to other people, like-minded people in those days was pretty awesome. The only problem with that was, I could instantly call up and, spend time on a BBS, but those were also long distance. So
I was going to ask you whether they were all long distance or not. So you had to pay that long distance charge. Yeah.
Yep, they were. And I'll never forget running my mom and dad's phone bill up to $800 or $900. And they weren't too happy about that.
I'll bet not. Yeah, I'll bet not. So when did you actually get back into vintage computers? When did you kind of get the bug to reacquire some of the stuff from back in the day?
Yeah, so I've kept the Commodore that I've always had, and I wasn't really super into vintage computers up until recently, but I always kept it. And, every once in a while I'd get it out of storage and play around with it and, connect it up and use it for a few days and then put it away. But after my brother John died, I came across it in kind of one of those similar instances, but it was a little different then. Once I got it out, I kind of started coming up with some new memories, remembering some of the good, the really good days and stories and things that shared with my brother. And it just, I was still kind of grieving from his loss. So, and it really helped. It was really therapeutic. So I really got into it at that time, and it, basically haven't put it back up since. It's, that was probably sometime in late 2022 when I really got back into vintage computing.
So that's when you started acquiring some of those other computers there behind you?
Yeah. Yeah, my first other computer that I acquired was a Commodore 128.
Those are nice. I like the 128. Yeah, that's
I do too. I always wanted one, and I saw one pop up on Facebook Marketplace, and then picked it up.
I even have a 128D, which
I do too.
I like that form factor. Yeah,
that's the 128D is actually my main retro computer setup, and I've got it set up in my house in the office. So
when did you decide that you were going to reboot Compute's Gazette magazine?
So it wasn't long after, I started getting back into retro computing. And I had a collection of Compute's Gazette magazines still. And I was just looking through and I was thinking to myself, it would be really awesome to have a new Compute's Gazette magazine. So I kind of started digging in and doing some research and kind of seeing where they went. And the last issue was published in 1991. And they were basically, I think, sold out to a competitor for the purposes of being shut down. So I don't know that that's 100% true, but I think that's something that I read on, one of the forums or historical sites or something like that. But it just seemed like after getting back into retro computing and seeing all of the new things that are coming out for retro computers today, it almost seemed that a shame that we didn't have a new publication that's really focused on kind of the same things that the old Computes Gazette was, more technical aspect of retro computing. I mean, there's game magazines like Gazette 64 and others, and they're really great magazines. Don't get me wrong. I love those. I've got a collection of those too, but they're really focused around more so the games aspect of retro computing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I enjoy games, I enjoy doing other things with, getting on BBSs, through the Wi-Fi adapters and building out different modifications and things like that with the computer. So I think that was really what was missing from, kind of the retro computing landscape today was, a publication like that I could, turn to, hold in my hand and take a look at. So sorry, I kind of went a little long on that, but after that, I started, doing some research, and I got on the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and saw that the trademark, had been dead for a long time.
Okay. And
I registered the trademark, and that process took about a year to get through, and finally got through that process, and everything, got the trademark awarded, and then I thought, well, heck, I'm going to go ahead and try this out and see what happens. So wanted to it's really when I made the decision I'm gonna give this a go and see how it goes. And I was a little apprehensive at first because I didn't know how the community would react to that, and if it would be supportable. And that's something we're still working through, but I can tell you from the response that I've gotten so far that it's definitely something that's been missed by the community, and I'm hoping that we can bring it back and keep it supported for a while now.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me because the community is a lot more vibrant now than it was five or 10 years ago for vintage computers. And
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be expanding. There are more shows all the time. There's a huge number of modern upgrades available for every platform, and you can't even keep up with those. So having a publication like that, I was excited as heck to hear that there might be a reboot of Compute magazine. It was always one of my favorite magazines. I didn't personally subscribe to Compute's Gazette because I was an Atari guy, but I did subscribe to Compute, and Compute actually had a lot of Atari coverage, and even an Atari ST separate magazine as well. So it sounds like you're going to focus on, or plan to focus on, all the retro computers and not just the Commodore, even though it's got the Compute's Gazette name, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're focusing on Atari, basically the 8-bit retro era. Mm-hmm. So it'll be Commodore, Atari, some are Apple II, some are your usual suspects, but also one of the other focus areas that we're working on is the concept of new retro, and that's some of the other computers that's came out in recent years, like the Commander X16 from the 8-bit guy. He they have a pretty big following around that computer as well. Mm-hmm. And I really like those too, because technically they're not retro computers, but they are very retro inspired, and exactly. They hold true to the, a lot of the design concepts and things from back in the day. And I think one of the big things that made retro computing special is because today you have PC and Mac basically. And, whether you choose a PC or you choose a Mac, they're essentially the same computer. There's not a ton difference between them. And that's different, I think, from the days of retro computing, where every computer you used had its own personality.
Exactly.
And that's really one of the things I really like about these European computers, because I can pull open an Amstrad CPC 464, and it's way different than a Commodore 64 or the even PC Micro. They're just different. I don't know how else to explain it.
There were so many different platforms, and there was really no standardization across them other than they had BASIC. But even the basics were different, right? I mean, some had Microsoft Basic, some did not, and it's different. Even just to start them up and interact with them at all, is they're all completely different. So I think it's wonderful that you're going to cover so many different machines. Yeah.
So you were an Atari guy, huh?
Yeah. That was my first computer was an TRS-80 Model 1.
And
then I moved to the Atari 8-bit, and then the Atari 16-bit, the ST, and then the clone, the IBM clones. Unfortunately,
yeah, I actually picked up an Atari ST recently. Well, not that recently. It's probably been a couple years ago that I picked that one up. Really enjoyed that computer. And I've got a Atari 400 XL that I picked up a few months ago that I really like. But recently made contact after announcing that I was redoing Computes Gazette magazine. Jerry White, who actually used to publish software and stuff for Ataris back in the day in Compute magazine, he reached out, and he's going to be contributing some Atari stuff.
Nice. That's awesome. So I was going to ask you whether you had any authors lined up for the magazine.
Yeah, we've had a pretty good outreach from several in the community who's kindly offered to donate time and effort into producing something great for the community, which has been really heartwarming, to be honest. It's given me a lot of hope of what this magazine can be. So I was super happy to hear from, especially I don't want to minimize people who weren't contributors back in those days, but when I get messages and emails from folks who actually worked on Compute and Computes Gazette magazine back in the day, it's pretty special to get those.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of interest there, just because that was such a great magazine, and of course they had an entire line of books too that I just think are wonderful. So I like the fact too that you're going to be offering a printed version of the magazine, like you told me, I think or maybe it was in your article, that you like to hold magazines in your hand, and I'm the same way. I like physical books and magazines.
Yeah, we're going to be. It'll be both. It'll be digital and physical. I don't know. It's even when I'm looking today. I still get e-versions of magazines and stuff like that, but I still miss having the physical touch of the magazine. Sure.
So you're planning to include some of the standard stuff that Computes magazine used to include, like articles, type in programs, reviews, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, so we've got we're still assembling the contents for the first issue now, but yeah, we're getting a good selection. We'll be having different hardware, software type reviews, some game reviews. We've got some contributions for some type-in programs. Some I've had a couple contributions for the type-ins for the Commander X16, so it uses its own version of BASIC. We'll have some Atari type-ins, and I'm hoping to get some Commodore type-ins too. But yeah, it's going to be the format and flow and content is going to be very similar to what was back in the old Computes Gazette.
Okay, so this might be a tough question here, but
sure,
the compute name really carries a lot of respect, in the community. Do you feel any extra pressure to make sure the magazine meets the standards that magazine set?
1,000%. Yeah, it's a ton of pressure, but I tend to work well under pressure, so it kind of holds me accountable to make sure that I'm producing something that's going to be worthy of the Compute name.
Sure.
I've gotten, like I say, the outpouring from the community has been really good. There's been a few folks who have not been so happy that I've decided to expand Compute's Gazette to pass the Commodore 64 128.
Oh, okay.
And that's a valid argument, right? I mean, the original Compute, it would have probably made more sense to just use the original Compute name instead of calling it Compute's Gazette.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, that's a perfectly valid argument, but I think you have to keep in mind also that this was really just a passion project for me to start with. So this is something that, Compute's Gazette was something that I resonated with. Compute was something you resonated with, as an Atari user. But I think, and I actually had both, but I think there were some subtle differences between the two magazines, and I really just enjoyed Compute's Gazette more than I did Compute. So being a personal project for me, a passion project, I went with Compute's Gazette instead of Compute.
Gotcha. Okay. So you originally planned to come out in May, but you're delaying till July, as I understand it.
Yep.
You were a little mysterious there about something going on in the community. Can you reiterate that?
So I can. There's only so much that I can share about that. So that I had originally intended on publishing in May, and I was doing a little bit of outreach. I wasn't doing a ton, but I was reaching out to some pretty big names in the retro computing industry, and one of the folks that I spoke with gave me some pretty big news that I've had to sign NDA to get. So I can't really talk about it right now, but I can tell you it was worthy of waiting an extra couple months to do this reboot.
Yeah. But you've got all the material ready for the first issue, and you're just kind of hanging
pretty
on
much.
to it.
Yeah. So I've had to rework based around that news. I had to rework some of the material. But for the most part, yeah, it's almost ready. Still taking contributions from folks, and basically what I'm working on now is trying to get the first issue tied together with a bow, ready to go to print, and then working on content for the second issue so we can be ready to go pretty quick for the next month. Another question I've gotten is, are you sure you're going to have enough content to support a monthly magazine? That I don't think that's going to be an issue now. And that may change later, but as of now, it seems like, especially, broadening the scope across, the multiple platforms, there's certainly enough news to go around.
Oh, yeah.
Information and new content.
Yeah. I think it'd be harder if you did focus on just one platform, but I think across the entire community, there's a lot going on every month. So
sure.
Did you consider? I know you've got pre-orders set up. People can subscribe either subscribe or just purchase the first version, pre-order it. Did you consider using something like Kickstarter for this?
I did, but again, and I may still do that at some point, just depending on, how we grow, because again, this being a passion project, this has been 100% basically funded by me so far. And of course, the pre-orders are going to help offset some of that cost, but I really wanted to kind of gauge the interest and see what the community thought that this would be something to support before I decided to, start putting in, a ton of effort for something that may just come out once.
Gotcha.
And I didn't want to set up a Kickstarter for something that would, get everybody's hopes up and then, let them down. So I wanted to get through this first issue. I wanted to get this in people's hands, get their get their thoughts and feelings and see if this would be something that the community would support. And if it is, which it's given me really strong indications now that it is something that the community really wants. So we may look at a Kickstarter or something down the road once we can kind of think about how we really want to make this sustainable, getting paid staff on board and really make something out of this.
Gotcha. So how are you getting the word out? How are you?
It's been completely, I haven't been advertising at all other than, Facebook posts, and, I put out a press release, and it's been picked up by a few folks, but I haven't really been advertising. It's been completely organic so far.
Okay. All right. Well, I was excited as heck to hear about it. Are you planning on attending any vintage computer shows and talk about it, at those or anything like that?
Yeah. So we've got, here local in Austin, we've got Classic Game Fest. It's a 3-day event that happens in July. We'll have a booth at that show.
There's VCF Southwest in end of June.
Yeah, so VCF Southwest actually fell on a date that I personally have a conflict with, that I can't attend that one. I've been talking to some other folks who may attend on our behalf. I'm not sure yet, but I'm hoping to be able to have some sort of presence there. But there's also a VCF that happens in Chicago.
Midwest is huge. It's one. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I've been talking with there's another magazine that's being produced, Old School Gamer. Mm-hmm. He and I've been talking quite a bit. He's very passionate about the old gaming magazine and stuff like that he works on, and he's been a big help. But he and I were actually talking yesterday and about maybe kind of joining up and going to that VCF.
Oh, so. Okay, awesome. Well, James, that's really, I think, all the questions I had. Were there any others that I should have asked about, or anything that you want to say?
Not really. The only thing is, I just wanted to thank everybody who believed in the project. And I know it's not an easy thing to do, to say, oh yeah, we've got, Computes Gazette coming back. It takes an act of faith, I think, as somebody in the community to be able to support something like that. So I really appreciate everybody's kind words and of encouragement and support. And I'm really looking forward to getting this first issue out and many more to come after that. So,
well, I wish you the best of luck with it. Like I said, I'm excited about it, and I really, really hope it works out, that you get the response that you need, to keep it going. And I'm looking forward to the first issue very much.
Same, me too.
I appreciate it very much, sir. And I appreciate your time. It was great talking with you. And again,
great
best of luck.
You, Randy. Thank you so much.
And I hope you get the word out here, hopefully. And I'll let you know when this gets published. Thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, that's it for the podcast this month. I want to give out special thanks to James Nagle for being willing to come onto the podcast and tell us all about his plans for Computes Gazette. I'm really pulling for him and wish him much success in this endeavor. I'll be personally watching this very closely. I've provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during this podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. I very much encourage you to provide feedback for the show at Apple Podcasts or on the website, via email at floppydays@gmail.com, on YouTube, just search for Floppy Days to find the channel, via Twitter at floppydays, on Blue Sky at floppydays.bsky.social, on Mastodon at floppydays@oldbytes.space, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays or on the Discord server whose link is at floppydays.com. Besides the primary locations of the website, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, Floppy Days is available for streaming at TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. If you're a YouTube user, I'd love for you to subscribe to Floppy Days there. That's where I publish all the videos associated with this podcast. For instance, the video of the discussion on the HP97 in earlier and future episodes with Wodek has been published there for early access for Patreon supporters, and it will be made available for all in a couple months. There are tons of videos out there, and more are coming every month. Again, the link to the YouTube channel can be found by searching for Floppy Days on YouTube, by using the link in the show notes, or by using the link from the website. On the main page, click the Go to YouTube channel icon. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.